Most men wake up defeated before they even open their eyes. The alarm sounds, and instead of rising, they reach for that small button, that innocent piece of technology that promises just 5 more minutes of peace. But those 5 minutes are never peaceful, are they? They're filled with a dull anxiety, a nagging guilt, a quiet voice whispering that you're already behind before the day has even started. And when the alarm sounds again, and again, and again, each press of that snooze button becomes a small surrender, a tiny betrayal of the person you promised yourself you would become. I've spent decades studying human behavior, and I can tell you with absolute certainty that how you wake up determines how you live. The snooze button isn't just about sleep. It's a symbol of something far deeper, far more dangerous. It's the physical manifestation of a mind that has lost its direction, a life that has become a series of reactions rather than deliberate choices. And the tragedy is that most people don't even realize they're doing it. They think they're just tired. They think they need more rest. They think if they could just get 1 more hour, 1 more night of good sleep, everything would be different. But it wouldn't, because the problem isn't the sleep. The problem is what you're waking up for. I learned this the hard way, through years of observing thousands of people, talking to men and women from every walk of life. I've sat across from executives who make 6 figures, but wake up with the same dread as the factory worker clocking in at dawn. I've counseled young professionals who thought success would cure their exhaustion, only to find themselves more depleted than ever. And I've watched countless individuals sabotage their own potential, not through lack of ability or opportunity, but through this one simple habit that they convinced themselves was harmless. The truth is, every time you hit snooze, you're training your brain to ignore your own commitments. You're teaching yourself that your word means nothing, that your intentions are negotiable, that the promises you make to yourself can be broken without consequence. And your subconscious is listening. It's always listening. It's taking notes on every action you take, every decision you make, and it's building a picture of who you really are, not who you think you are. When you set an alarm for 6 in the morning, you're making a contract with yourself. You're saying, "Wait, tomorrow at 6 a.m. I will get up and take control of my day." But when that alarm goes off and you hit snooze, you're breaking that contract. You're telling yourself in the most primal way possible that you can't be trusted, that your decisions are meaningless, that your future self will have to deal with the consequences of your present weakness, and your future self does deal with it. Every single day, the modern worker lives in a state of perpetual exhaustion, not because the work is too hard, but because they've never learned to align their actions with their intentions. They wake up already feeling behind, rushed through their morning routine without presence or purpose, arrive at work still half asleep, spend 8 to 10 hours in a fog of distraction and obligation, come home depleted, numb themselves with screens and food and entertainment, and collapse into bed with a vague sense of having accomplished nothing meaningful. Then they set their alarm, promising themselves that tomorrow will be different, knowing deep down that it won't be. This is the cycle. This is the trap. And the snooze button is where it begins. Let me be absolutely clear about something. Your exhaustion is real. I'm not dismissing it. The fatigue you feel when that alarm goes off at dawn is genuine, but it's not caused by what you think it's caused by. Most people believe they're tired because they didn't sleep enough, or because they worked too hard, or because life is demanding too much from them. And while those factors play a role, they're not the root cause. The root cause is something far more insidious, something that most people never address, because they don't even know it's there. You're tired because you're living without purpose. You're exhausted because nothing you do during the day feels meaningful. You're drained because you've lost the connection between your daily actions and your deeper values. And when you wake up to face another day of that disconnection, of course your body resists. Of course you want to stay in bed. Because on some level, your mind knows that what awaits you out there isn't worth the energy. I've met men who wake up at 4:30 in the morning with more energy than they know what to do with. I've seen people leap out of bed before their alarm even sounds, eager to begin their day. And every single one of them has something in common. They know why they're waking up. They have a reason that's bigger than comfort, stronger than fatigue, more compelling than the warm embrace of their blankets. They're not forcing themselves to get up. They're being pulled up by something they care about deeply. But for most people, that pull doesn't exist. They wake up because they have to, not because they want to. They get out of bed because society demands it, because bills need to be paid, because bosses expect them to show up. And so the morning becomes an act of obligation rather than opportunity. The alarm becomes an enemy rather than a call to action. And the snooze button becomes a small rebellion, a tiny moment of control in a life that feels increasingly out of their hands. This is what I mean when I say the problem isn't the sleep. The problem is what you're waking up for. Because if you had something worth getting up for, you wouldn't need to force yourself. If your days were filled with purpose and meaning and progress towards something you actually cared about, your body would naturally want to participate. But when your days are filled with obligation and distraction and the slow erosion of your own potential, of course you want to hide from them. The snooze button is a symptom, it's not the disease. And yet it's also the perfect place to begin the cure. Because unlike your job, unlike your circumstances, unlike all the external factors that seem beyond your control, the snooze button is entirely within your power. It's a choice you make, a decision point that happens every single morning. And it's in these small daily decisions that your character is built or destroyed, your future is created or abandoned, your life takes shape or falls apart. Let me tell you what really happens when you hit snooze. Physiologically, you're fragmenting your sleep cycle. Those extra minutes of sleep aren't restful, they're not restorative. In fact, they often make you feel worse, more groggy, more disoriented. Your brain was already in the process of waking up, producing cortisol to help you become alert, adjusting your body temperature, preparing you for consciousness. But when you hit snooze and fall back asleep, you're interrupting that process. You're confusing your body's natural rhythms. And when the alarm sounds again 10 or 15 minutes later, you're pulled out of a new sleep cycle before it's complete, leaving you in that foggy state that can last for hours. But that's not the real damage. The real damage is psychological. Every time you hit snooze, you're reinforcing a pattern of self-betrayal. You're strengthening the neural pathways that tell you it's okay to break promises to yourself. You're training your mind to prioritize immediate comfort over long-term goals. And most dangerously, you're starting your day from a position of defeat. Before you've even stood up, before you've taken your first conscious breath, you've already lost the first battle of the day. And your mind notices. Oh, it notices everything. Think about how it feels when you finally drag yourself out of bed after hitting snooze 3 or 4 times. There's a heaviness there, isn't there? A sense of already being behind, of having wasted time, of being weak. You rush through your morning, cutting corners, skipping things that matter, arriving at work feeling frazzled and unprepared. And throughout the day, there's this subtle undercurrent of self-disappointment, this quiet knowledge that you started from a place of failure. It colors everything. It affects your confidence, your decision-making, your energy levels, your relationships. I've watched this pattern play out in countless lives, and here's what I've learned. The people who can't get out of bed aren't lazy. They're not undisciplined. They're lost. They've disconnected from their own purpose, their own power, their own possibility. And the snooze button, that innocent little feature that seems so harmless, has become the daily ritual through which they confirm their own powerlessness. But here's what most people don't understand about habits and behavior change. You can't fix a habit by fighting it directly. You can't overcome the snooze button through willpower alone. I've seen people try. They set multiple alarms, they put their phone across the room, they create elaborate systems and routines, and sometimes these tactics work for a few days, maybe even a few weeks. But eventually they fail, because they're addressing the symptom, not the cause. The cause is deeper. It's in how you think about your life, how you relate to your own future, how you experience meaning and purpose in your daily existence. And until you address that deeper level, no amount of alarm clock positioning is going to change your fundamental relationship with the morning. I spent years believing that success was about doing more, working harder, pushing through exhaustion, and I watched myself and others burn out in the pursuit of goals that ultimately meant nothing. It wasn't until I completely restructured my understanding of human motivation that I began to see the pattern. People don't wake up tired because they're physically depleted. They wake up tired because they're spiritually depleted. They're living lives that drain them rather than fill them. They're spending their days on things that don't matter, with people who don't see them, toward outcomes they don't care about. And no amount of sleep can cure that kind of exhaustion. So, when I talk about programming your brain to wake up without feeling exhausted, I'm not talking about sleep hygiene, though that matters. I'm not talking about going to bed earlier, though that helps. I'm talking about something far more fundamental. I'm talking about reconstructing your relationship with your own life. I'm talking about finding or creating reasons to be awake that are stronger than your desire to stay asleep. I'm talking about becoming the kind of person who has something worth getting up for. This requires a level of honesty that most people aren't willing to face. It requires looking at your life and asking hard questions. What am I actually doing with my days? What am I building? What matters to me? And if I'm not living in alignment with what matters to me, why not? What am I afraid of? What am I avoiding? What story have I been telling myself about what's possible or impossible for my life? These questions are uncomfortable. They bring up feelings of regret, of wasted time, of opportunities missed. They force you to confront the gap between who you are and who you want to be. And for many people, it's easier to just hit snooze, to avoid the confrontation, to postpone the reckoning for another day. But every day you postpone it, the gap grows wider. Every morning you hit snooze, you're making a choice about what kind of person you're becoming. And I'm here to tell you that the person who can't get out of bed on time is becoming someone who can't be trusted, with bigger responsibilities, bigger opportunities, bigger challenges. Because if you can't keep a promise to yourself about something as simple as getting out of bed, how can you expect yourself to keep promises about the things that really matter? Your brain is watching. It's always watching. And it's learning from every action you take. When you hit snooze, your brain learns that immediate discomfort is to be avoided at all costs, even at the expense of your stated goals. When you drag yourself out of bed defeated, your brain learns that mornings are something to be endured rather than embraced. When you start your day feeling behind and rushed, your brain learns that chaos and reactivity are your natural state. But it doesn't have to be this way. Your brain is also capable of learning different patterns, healthier patterns, more powerful patterns. And the beautiful thing about the human mind is that it can change far more quickly than most people realize. You don't need years of therapy or months of gradual adjustment. You need clarity of purpose and commitment to consistency. You need to understand why you're making the change and then make it decisively, without negotiation. Let me tell you how this actually works, the mechanics of reprogramming your brain's relationship with morning. First, you must understand that your brain doesn't respond well to negative motivation. You can't scare yourself into waking up early. You can't guilt yourself into getting out of bed. You can't use punishment or shame or self-hatred as fuel for lasting change. Those tactics might work for a day or two, but they're not sustainable. Eventually, you'll rebel against your own tyranny. What your brain does respond to is purpose. It responds to clarity. It responds to the feeling of moving towards something meaningful rather than away from something painful. This is why people who have a compelling reason to wake up don't struggle with the snooze button. They're not fighting against their own resistance. They're being pulled forward by something bigger than their comfort. So the first step, the foundation of everything else, is identifying your reason. Not a superficial reason like, I want to be productive or I should exercise more, but a deep reason, a real reason, something that connects to your core values and your vision for your life. Maybe it's building something that matters. Maybe it's becoming the kind of parent your children need. Maybe it's developing a skill that will change your career trajectory. Maybe it's simply reclaiming your own dignity and self-respect. Whatever it is, it has to be real for you. It has to be something you feel in your chest, not just something that sounds good in your head. And you have to connect that reason to your morning routine. You have to make the link explicit. When that alarm goes off, you're not just waking up to go to work. You're waking up to take one more step toward becoming the person you're meant to be. This isn't motivational fluff. This is how the brain actually works. Your subconscious mind is constantly scanning your environment and your behaviors, trying to determine what's important, what's worth your energy, what deserves your attention. And when it sees consistent patterns, it builds neural pathways to support those patterns. If every morning you demonstrate through your actions that your goals don't matter, that your commitments can be broken, that comfort is more important than growth, your brain will make that the default. It will make it easier to stay in bed and harder to get up. But if every morning you demonstrate the opposite, if you show through your actions that your word matters, that your commitments are sacred, that your future is worth the temporary discomfort of leaving your bed, your brain will start to support that pattern instead. It will release the chemicals that make you alert. It will reduce the resistance you feel. It will make waking up easier, more natural, more automatic. This is why people who consistently wake up at the same time eventually stop needing an alarm. Their brain learns the pattern and starts the waking process before the alarm even sounds. But this only happens when you're consistent, when you're clear, when you're committed. It doesn't happen if you're wishy-washy about it, if you negotiate with yourself, if you make exceptions whenever you don't feel like following through. The second critical element is evening preparation. Most people who struggle with mornings are sabotaging themselves the night before. They stay up too late, scrolling mindlessly through their phones, watching shows they don't even enjoy, eating foods that disrupt their sleep, going to bed with their mind racing and their body wired. Then they wonder why they can't wake up refreshed. Your evening routine is just as important as your morning routine, maybe more so, because the quality of your sleep determines the quality of your waking, and the quality of your sleep is determined by what you do in the hours before you go to bed. If you're filling your mind with stress and stimulation and blue light and conflict, of course you're going to sleep poorly. Of course you're going to wake up feeling like you haven't rested at all. What you need is an evening routine that signals to your brain that it's time to wind down, time to transition, from doing to being, time to let go of the day and prepare for restoration. This looks different for everyone, but the principles are the same. Reduce stimulation, especially from screens. Create a physical environment that supports sleep, cool, dark, quiet. Give your mind something calming to focus on, whether that's reading, meditation, gentle stretching, or simple breathing exercises. And most importantly, go to bed at roughly the same time every night. Your body has natural rhythms, circadian patterns that govern your sleep-wake cycle. When you go to bed at wildly different times, you're constantly disrupting these rhythms, making it harder for your body to know when it's supposed to sleep and when it's supposed to wake. But when you establish consistency, when you honor these natural patterns, your body starts to work with you instead of against you. The third element, and this is where most people fail, is absolute commitment to the decision. Not trying, not attempting, not doing your best, but deciding with finality that this is who you are now. You are someone who wakes up when they say they're going to wake up. You are someone who doesn't negotiate with themselves. You are someone whose word to themselves is sacred. This might sound extreme, but it's necessary, because if you leave room for negotiation, your brain will always find reasons to negotiate. The bed will always be more comfortable. The extra sleep will always seem more appealing. The day ahead will always present challenges that make staying asleep seem like the better option. But when the decision is final, when there's no debate, your brain stops searching for reasons to stay in bed and starts focusing on how to make waking up easier. I've seen people transform their entire lives by mastering this one thing. Not because waking up early is magical, but because the discipline required to get out of bed when you don't feel like it is the same discipline required to do anything worth doing in life. When you train yourself to overcome the resistance of the morning, you're training yourself to overcome resistance in general. You're building the muscle of self-command, the capacity to do what needs to be done, regardless of how you feel. And that capacity is what separates people who achieve their goals from people who just talk about them. Because the truth is, you rarely feel like doing the things that will change your life. You don't feel like going to the gym. You don't feel like having the difficult conversation. You don't feel like doing the deep work that your project requires. You don't feel like being patient with your children when you're exhausted. You don't feel like showing up when you'd rather hide. But successful people, fulfilled people, people who actually build lives they're proud of, they do it anyway. Not because they're superhuman, not because they have more willpower, but because they've trained themselves to act based on commitment rather than feeling. And That training starts with something as simple as getting out of bed when you said you would. Now, I know some of you are thinking, but Dale, I've tried this before. I've set my alarm. I've gone to bed earlier. I've had all the motivation in the world, and I still hit snooze. What am I doing wrong? And my answer is this. You're focusing on the behavior instead of the identity. You're trying to change what you do without changing who you are. Behavior change that lasts doesn't come from willpower or discipline alone. It comes from identity shift. You have to become someone for whom hitting snooze is simply not an option, not because you're forcing yourself, but because it's incompatible with who you've decided to be. When a professional athlete's alarm goes off for morning training, they don't debate it. They don't negotiate, they get up. Not because they have more willpower than you, but because their identity as an athlete makes the decision automatic. You need to cultivate that same clarity around your own identity. Who are you becoming? What does that version of you do when the alarm goes off? How does that person handle mornings? And then you act from that identity, not as a goal you're trying to reach, but as a truth about who you already are. This is the difference between I'm trying to wake up early and I'm someone who wakes up early. The first is an attempt, always subject to failure, always negotiable. The second is a statement of identity, a truth that guides your behavior automatically, and your brain will align your actions with your identity, as long as your identity is clear and consistent. The final piece, and this is where the real transformation happens, is understanding what waking up is really about. It's not about being productive, it's not about squeezing more hours into your day. It's not about achieving more or doing more, or becoming some perfect version of yourself. It's about something far simpler and far more profound. Waking up is about reclaiming your life. It's about taking ownership of your time, your energy, your choices. It's about proving to yourself that you're not a victim of circumstances, that you're not controlled by your feelings, that you're not a slave to comfort and convenience. Every morning that you get out of bed, despite the resistance, you're making a declaration. You're saying, I am in charge here, I decide what happens, I choose my path. And that declaration, repeated daily, transforms everything. It doesn't just change your mornings, it changes your entire relationship with yourself. You start to trust yourself again. You start to believe in your own capacity to do hard things. You start to see yourself as someone who follows through, someone who keeps their word, someone who doesn't need to rely on motivation or perfect conditions to take action. This self-trust is the foundation of all achievement, all growth, all meaningful change. Without it, you're constantly second-guessing yourself, constantly starting and stopping, constantly making promises you can't keep. But with it, you become unstoppable. Not because nothing can stand in your way, but because you know you'll keep moving forward no matter what stands in your way. So let me give you something practical to take with you, something you can implement starting tonight. Before you go to bed, I want you to write down 3 things. First, write down the time you're going to wake up tomorrow. Be specific, not around 7 or early. A specific time. Second, write down why. That matters. Connect it to something deeper than productivity or obligation. Why does waking up at that time serve the person you're becoming? Third, write down what you're going to do in the first 30 minutes after you wake up. Not your entire day, just the first 30 minutes. Something that grounds you, centers you, reminds you of why you're doing this. Then, and this is critical, when that alarm goes off, you move. No negotiation, no debate, no, just 5 more minutes. You move your body, you sit up, you put your feet on the floor, you stand, and you do it immediately, within 5 seconds of the alarm sounding. Because the moment you start thinking about it, you've already lost. The thinking is the trap. The hesitation is where the snooze button wins. Your brain will throw every excuse at you. It will tell you you're too tired, that you need more sleep, that just this once won't matter, that you can start tomorrow instead. But you know better now. You know that's just the comfortable part of you trying to stay comfortable. And you know that the person you're becoming doesn't live in that comfort. They live in the space beyond it, in the territory of growth and challenge and self-respect. So you move. And in that movement, in that simple act of getting out of bed when you said you would, you're doing something revolutionary. You're proving to yourself that you can be trusted. You're building the foundation of discipline. You're taking back control of your life, one morning at a time. This isn't easy. I won't lie to you and tell you it is. The first few mornings will be hard. Your body will resist, your mind will protest, you'll feel the pull of the bed, the seduction of the snooze button. But you'll also feel something else, something you might not have felt in a long time. You'll feel proud of yourself. You'll feel strong. You'll feel like you're finally in charge of your own life. And that feeling, that sense of self-command, that's what will carry you through. Not motivation, not willpower, but the deep satisfaction of becoming someone you can respect. Someone who does what they say they'll do. Someone who doesn't betray themselves every morning before the day even begins. The world will tell you that success is about strategy, about tactics, about finding the right system or method or hack. And those things have their place, but I've learned through decades of studying human achievement and human failure that success is really about character. It's about becoming the kind of person who can be trusted with success. And that character is built in small moments, in daily decisions, in the 1,000 tiny choices that nobody sees, but that determine who you're becoming. Waking up without hitting snooze is one of those choices. It seems small, it seems insignificant, but it's not. It's a daily referendum on your self-respect, your commitment, your ability to do hard things. And when you master it, when you truly master it, you'll find that everything else becomes a little bit easier, not because waking up is the hardest thing you'll ever do, but because you've proven to yourself that you can overcome resistance, that you can act with intention, that you can be the architect of your own life rather than its victim. So tonight, when you set your alarm, make a decision. Not a hope, not a wish, not an intention, a decision. Decide who you're going to be tomorrow morning. Decide that you're done negotiating with yourself, done breaking promises, done starting your days from a place of defeat. Decide that tomorrow morning when that alarm sounds, you're going to do something different. You're going to get up. You're going to reclaim your mornings. You're going to take the first step toward becoming the person you know you're capable of being. And then do it. And then do it again the next day. And the day after that. Not forever, not for some distant goal, but just for tomorrow. One day at a time, one morning at a time, one decision at a time. Because that's how transformation really happens. Not in grand gestures or perfect plans, but in the accumulated weight of daily choices that align with who you're becoming. Your life is waiting for you. Not next month, not next year, not when conditions are perfect. It's waiting for you tomorrow morning in those first moments after the alarm sounds. And what you do in those moments will tell you everything you need to know about where your life is headed. Will you hit snooze and stay comfortable? Or will you rise and take ownership of your day, your time, your potential? The choice is yours. It always has been. And it starts tomorrow morning.